Hello, I'm going to be talking a little quieter today because there is some company over, but today I wanted to talk about Assassin's Creed because there's a pretty big deal going on with Assassin's Creed Mirage around this entire project and everything that's happening with it. Now, one thing that we talk about a lot on this channel, obviously Assassin's Creed is one of them, Batman, James Bond, Fallout, and all kinds of other stuff, but I think one major thing I try and hone in on and focus on this channel is fans and the fan relationship with properties that they care about. I think often something we've discussed is that the fandom, or maybe I should say individual fans, because when you get in a big group with fandoms, there's often a lot of bad behavior that goes on, but individual fans at the very least who speak their mind are one of the reasons that a lot of these brands exist, are as popular as they are, and those fans often have more passion, or at the very least as much passion as the most passionate of the development teams behind them. So that's no different with Assassin's Creed, and in recent years it's been a big point of contention with the rise of the Assassin's Creed RPG. Now, I would argue that all of the Assassin's Creed games have pretty much been a sort of RPG, with like the action RPG, stealth, role-playing type gameplay, but it's gone much more into the RPG-focused side of things with numbers-based combat, leveling up-based combat, and obviously things like that. I would say level gates almost, or soft level gates on certain content, and then just the massive open world and massive RPG structure of the more modern Assassin's Creed titles of the last trilogy being much more focused on being big than on being smaller or intimate, right? And that's why I wanted to talk about this today, because there was a recent Games Radar interview that I thought was very, very interesting about Assassin's Creed Mirage that I think is going to have a lot of you excited, as it was stated that Assassin's Creed Mirage's more intimate scale was directly shaped by fans being exhausted with enormous RPGs. Now, while I enjoy Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla, they are massive games, and I also understand a lot of the fan criticisms with them. I think they're much more about the Isu side of things, much more about that first civilization type side of things, and much less about the assassin-focused side of things. And so because of that, I do understand why a lot of people have grown tired of that sort of thing, and I think that there's room for both. I don't think you or I have to necessarily play every single Assassin's Creed game that comes out to be a fan, but I do think it's a little ridiculous if they were to just move in that direction and dump the old gameplay style permanently. I don't think that that's a good look or a good way to go with the series at all. So for 2023, there was a showcase for Assassin's Creed Mirage, and Games Radar talked to creative director Stefan Boudon, who said that while a convergence of several inputs helped shape the creation of Mirage, the first in their mind is the voice of the community. Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla, they are all great games with the promise to live an epic journey in a strong fantasy, he says. Now, they did go on to talk about this as well, saying, amongst our fans, we started hearing the desire for a character-driven story focused on the core pillars of the first Assassin's Creeds in a more intimate scale. It resonates with us as well as developers, and this was the starting point of the project when it comes to Mirage. They said that Mirage is going to pay homage to the original Assassin's Creed in many different ways with its more intimate scale, and that it's really going to be a fun project that's actually going to address a lot of these fan concerns. So that's something that I wanted to talk about a little bit. I know it's not a huge video, but something that I find very interesting and good about this is that it's actually listening to what the fans want, and it's actually going forward and taking that into consideration and doing something with it, instead of just saying, yeah, but we know better. Because, I can enjoy the RPG games for what they are, definitely, and I know a lot of people do, and a lot of people don't, and that's totally fine. Just like there's a lot of people who have gone back and told me how much they love Assassin's Creed Unity now, I get just as many comments saying that people just still don't like it, and still have 100,000 problems with it and just don't even want to give it the time of day. When it comes to a franchise this big, there's going to be varying opinions and varying desires for different types of products. But one thing that frustrates me in gaming is when you move away from what made your franchise good, but you never go back. If you want to do different ideas in the meantime, you want to do things like this sort of Isu trilogy, focusing a little bit more on that side of things, I'm cool with that. That's totally fine. But for me, that means at some point you have to come back to the basics, back to the roots of what made Assassin's Creed good as well. You don't just permanently dump that. And to me, with the RPG games, despite being someone who's enjoyed them, that's really my issue with it, is the idea of not going back to that classic style at all. I think that this is a really good step. And the reason I wanted to share this is because every time Ubisoft steps in it, I have talked about it, at least in the last year or so, with Assassin's Creed. And when it comes down to it, I personally don't feel comfortable just being the guy to dunk on companies. Obviously, I know that I am not in charge of any of these things, and there's a lot more that goes into them than I see. But I will say, too, that the fans and the voices of those communities and the hearts of the players who actually drive these products forward and actually make them more than just a bargain bin title, dime a dozen game that you'll see, everywhere, not flying off the shelves. What made Assassin's Creed Assassin's Creed? It was the attention to detail. It was the passion behind it. It was the love from the writers and creators and all of that, of course, and the programmers. But it was also the fandom. So you need to, at some point, listen to those people, and I'm excited to see that they are. I truly believe that this is a franchise that can support multiple types of media. Despite the failures of the movie, this is a franchise that could very easily support movies. This is a franchise that is now supporting manga. There's a Xiaojun manga going on. I think it might have finished, or maybe it's getting one more book, I'm not sure right now. That's pretty good. There is a lot of different mediums that this franchise can actually encapsulate because of how big it is and its attention to detail and its rich history based both in the real world and in science fiction. And it's just frustrating to me that because of how non-attentive some of the rights holders and the people at the top have been with this franchise in terms of what people want out of it, we've only seen certain things that reach towards what the franchise is capable of. We've seen half-hearted attempts at a movie, or we've seen just a shove push into hardcore RPG styles instead of a gradual change, or instead of both styles at the same time. There's really no reason that you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can absolutely do an Isu trilogy off on its own, in canon talking about stuff, but you can also go back and do those classic styles of games that we'd see with someone like Altair or Ezio. There's really no reason we can't do both of them. And what I hope is, even though they've said in the past that Mirage doesn't mean they're going to go back in this direction for all games, what I hope is that we get some more experiences like this, because there's a big portion of the Assassin's Creed fans who feel unheard and feel ignored, who actually want to play the games but either don't have time for the huge RPGs, or it's just not really their thing. And it would be fair enough to say, well, then they can leave if this franchise was always that way, right? So if the franchise started off at Assassin's Creed 1 and it maintained that style all the way through, and I, after 15 games, said, I just don't like this style, it should change. Okay, well then I don't really like these games. It'd be fair enough for people to say, hey, listen, man, I get it. That's a cool idea, but this is what the franchise is. If you don't like that, that's fine. But that's what it is. But the fact that it changed in the middle, actually I would say near the latter portion of the franchise's releases, and then a lot of the people who played every game up to then didn't connect with the new style, that's something that I still have a lot of empathy with and understand. Even if I do like those games as well, I think that because of that, it's not fair when people say, oh, well, if you don't like the RPG games, you can just leave. Just as much as I don't think it's fair when people say, if you do like the RPG games, you're not a real Assassin's Creed fan. I already made a video about that too, on both sides, because I think it's just a joke. You need to be really careful when talking to people about this stuff. If it had never changed, like I said, I would understand the stance of well, maybe you just don't like the games. But it did change, and there's a lot of people who still like the games and wanted to play them and just didn't connect with this new style. So if they are listening with Mirage and actually going back and rectifying that and making another experience in that classic style, I am all for it. 100% on board with that mentality. Now, you still have to stick the landing and make it good, but that's something that's really, really cool to see, because you do have to listen to the fans. You do have to listen to people. And there's this weird conflation of this where people will say, gamers or fans are entitled and blah, blah, blah. And it's you know what? At the end of the day, when you pay the bills for the companies, you know what I mean? When you're the one paying $70 out of your salary and you're making not that much money, and that's actually a decent chunk of change to you to buy a product, you should have an input. You should have the ability to say, hey, listen, I didn't like this. Now, it doesn't mean they have to change it, but you're absolutely entitled to your input. And you're, of course, entitled to not buy the games after that if you don't connect with them and don't like them. And there's a lot of fans who did that, with the more recent Isu RPG trilogy who didn't connect with them and they didn't buy them. And that was their way of voicing what they like or don't like. And so I think it's really important that when you're fostering these franchises that you actually do take that into consideration and listen, because at the end of the day, the reason franchises fall and crumble and, go by the wayside and lose relevance, it's not usually just because of those darn kids and people lose interest on a whim and all this stuff. That doesn't really happen that much. What it really is just mishandling and not listening and not remembering what made it good and not, either not realizing when to quit and when to take a break or not realizing what directions to go and pushing forward anyway or just not going forward anywhere. Those are the kinds of things that really hurt this stuff. So I think it's really good to listen. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm always interested to hear your thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I will be making more Assassin's Creed videos, but I have to go somewhere for work today. So if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. I truly think that this franchise is bigger than people give it credit for in terms of the scope and capacity of what it can do, and that it's capable of doing both. If you don't want to play both, I totally understand. Maybe you came in at Origins and that's your style, or maybe you hated that and that's not your style. But for them to just dump the styles and never do it again, I'm not a fan of that. So let me know what you think. Have a fantastic day. And as always, everyone, stay shui.